This is Brad Esau of Taming the Polar Bears. I haven't done a broadcast in quite some time. Lots of reasons for that. The last thing I'd done and had put up online was a interview with Francis Seeley, formerly of the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, in his role as the leader of the online community Global Net 21. That was about a month ago. It's now mid-August. That was actually was exactly a month ago. I've rewatched that several times. You know, I didn't get to everything I would have liked to say. So, but Francis asked some very interesting questions. Not all of which I got to really adequately address, and that's what this talk is about today. There's some really, I watched the interview again a few days ago, and I could really hear some really important questions and aspects that I didn't get to. Now, you know, my story and the blog has become, you know, has reached you know, more people around the world than I ever could have imagined. And it's, you know, everything I write about, everything in the blog and what I talk about in these videos is about mental health. And not just about mental health, of course, but preventing the worst aspects of poor mental health. And you know, I spent some time in that interview going over my story. I don't want to go through that again. I'll kind of, some of that will emerge through this talk. Yeah, you know, it's an odd thing to have one story so widely known, but even more so to know that so many people look to you as an inspiration. And you know, I've never been unaware of the responsibility that comes with that. It's why I try to be so careful with what I put into the blog and what I put into these videos. But it struck me again every time I reach a new audience and hear people and hear their anguish and hear their needs. It hits me anew. And you know, my story is very, very different. It's very, very unique. And everybody wants to know how I did it. And as I said in that interview, there are just no easy answers. I said at the time, I don't know what to say in any one aspect of what I did. And, you know, and this bothered me afterwards. You know, I could hear people, you know, just really wanting to know what to do. And it's hard for me to leave people hanging because I remember where I was when I didn't know what to do, and I just wanted answers. So, so today's talk, you know, after giving all of that, what I talked about in the interview and the answers I gave and the answers which I thought were inadequate, after giving it a lot of thought, today's subject is you know, the answers, the answer, the base answer where we all have to start if we want to achieve better mental health. Now back to responsibility and being an inspiration and people following my story. You know, people say, you know, I want to do what you did. I want to follow your way. And, you know, it's really humbling. It's, you know, when I started the Polar Bears, that's kind of what I hoped for. But when that actually happens, it's quite a big thing. And so, you know, again, I feel an enormous amount of responsibility to do and say the best things possible. So, the question that Francis, I talked about a number of things in a number of different ways and approaches that I have, and Francis kept trying to sort of dig back to, what he was looking kind of for a core base answer for how I did this, how I overcame, one of the most horrible cases of bipolar on my own, without the aid of the mental health system and professionals. And that's not completely true that I did it completely alone. It's true that I created my own system and followed it my own way, without the support of professionals. But it's not really true to say that I did it on my own. So, what I thought of when I thought of Francis's questions and what some of the participants in the webinar seminar, the webinar interview wanted to know, that this kind of core answer to, how I did this and how does this work. That leads us to today's topic. And it's self-response. Oh boy, here we go. I screw, I misspell words every time. Self-response ability. I think I have that right. So everybody wants to know how I did this. This is where I started. Now let me give a little bit of background into, a little bit about my case and my approach to understanding what happened. Now, I'm type 1 bipolar. It's the worst kind of bipolar. I exhibited most of the worst symptoms of type 1 bipolar. In an objective way, getting outside of my own subjective experience on this, in an outside objective way, looking at the case, it's literally one of the hardest psychiatric cases there are. The prognosis for good outcomes is either just staying alive, staying away from things where my kind of cases generally go, substance abuse, homelessness, either that or kind of drugged into a sort of coma. And none of those outcomes were what I wanted. I wanted something different, which is where I'm at today. So this is one of the worst cases of one of the worst psychiatric disorders there is. Now, along with that, and this is common with bipolar, is I was also quite affected by certain aspects of borderline personality disorder. And I'm not going to completely explain that today. Now, one of the things that makes me very different is I studied neuroscience on my own. I wanted to know from the best neuroscience I could find, and cognitive neuroscience, what was going on in my mind and brain and why all these things happened to me. What I concluded was much of what we experience in mental health cases, I don't like the word mental illness, but severe cases of mental health disorders, they boil down to how our brain reacts to life around us. And when I looked back on everything that happened, all my meltdowns, every episode, everything that went on, and I'm talking horrific cases of psychosis. I'm talking about ending up on train tracks, waiting for a train, and I didn't plan to go there. That just something took over, and there I was. And there's a long list of things like that. You know, I'm not talking about just getting a little emotional. You know, when I examined all these, when I could step back and examine all these things, they were all reactions to what was going on around me, what my mind observed or heard. And so, you know, the question then became, how do I deal with these reactions? And you know, I spent an enormous, I can't tell you the amount of study I put into this, not just in neuroscience, but just everything available I can find, relevant material I could find in fields like psychology, the psychology of change. I looked through countless examples of how and what people do to change how their minds work, how their brains work, whether it was addictions, you know, all the difficult things that people get into. And what I'm going to talk about today was the base answer: self-responsibility. It all starts there. Now, you know, I've understood this for a long time, and I've touched on this in the blog, and I find it difficult to talk about. And since I've started this blog and everything I do, as I've said before, enormous, and not an enormous, but a very good number of people reach out to me for help. And when I hear their pain and anguish and where they are, and I start trying to get them onto a better way, or I hear questions, I read comments, you know, I hear people in a really wide variety of ways, directly, indirectly, all kinds of ways, and you know, I see where they're at. I know where they're at because I've been there. I know where they're at because I understand the science of what's going on in their mind. And I understand the life circumstances around them, and to tell people they have to take self-responsibility when they're in this maelstrom of stuff going on, it is hard. It's really hard. It was really hard for me, and so it's, you know, when I'm being compassionate and just you know, all I can hear is the pain in their situations and the frustration and all of these things. You know, it's hard for me to tell them, you know, you have to take responsibility. It's just one of those things none of us are really happy about hearing. Nonetheless, this is what I found through enormous paths, and I'll get more to that in a blog post someday. So yeah, self-responsibility is really hard, which leads me to the second thing to answer, you know, the questions that came up in the webinar interview. You know, how did I do this? How do I continue to do this? And it comes down to learning how to do the hard thing. You know, this is just, you know, both of these things, you know, actually, you know, don't really necessarily have anything to do with mental health. These are just two fundamental life lessons. You know, you want to change your life, Nobody else can do that. There's no psychiatrist, there's no doctor. I can't do that. Nobody can do that. You have to. So that's where self-responsibility comes in. And the other thing is, you know, whatever's going on in life, and if you have mental health problems, I can guarantee you, you know, your life sucks. And it's what's going on in your life is hard. And this is another truth, and I touched on this in the interview, is, you know, we need help. There's no question we need help. I badly needed help. And a lot of that help is useful. And in hindsight, a lot of, you know, I dismiss the mental health system and all these things, but the, you know, while they didn't put me where I am today, the truth is I wouldn't be where I am today without some of the help I got in the mental health care system. So, but at some point, you know, we can't rely on others. At some point, we have to do it. And, you know, and just, you know, through all the things I went through, and this is just never not a battle. It is never not a battle for me, even though I kind of make it look easy to some people, it's not. And, you know, I still have reactions. Life is much better than it was. My mental health is much better than it was, there's no question. But as I said in that interview, I don't do certain things happen, and, you know, boom, I'm right down the rabbit hole again. And every time I go down there and I come out the other side and I look at what I need to do, what I still need to learn, what I still need to work on, comes back to self-responsibility. This is up to me, nobody else. And, you know, is it hard? Yeah, fucking rights, it's hard. Pardon my French. I know it's really fucking hard. I've been there. But you have to do it. There's just no choice. And, you know, what I found is if I just kind of accept that, it actually, in a weird, it does get easier in a weird way, not easy, easier. When we just accept, okay, this is hard. I have to deal with this. I, not somebody else, I have to deal with this. It, in a weird way, makes it easier in the sense that it kind of clears the path, clears our mind. We kind of get out of this panicky mode, and it just becomes kind of clear. Okay, I just have to knuckle down and do this. Now, I've on to self-responsibility, and I forgot my my eraser. You know, why this is so important. And, you know, again, this is from examining, you know, every single horror of my own life, and untold amounts of case studies, cases that I personally work with or observe, or dozens and dozens of cases that I read. And when I see the common thread of what got people out the other side, it was at some point taking full 100% responsibility for what goes on up here. So the other thing this kind of ties into a little bit is isolation. Going through all this, and you know, and I needed help, I needed support, I needed all kinds of things. You know, but at the very time I needed all these things, at the worst points of my disorder and condition and circumstances, when I needed help from friends and family, that's when I was abandoned the most. And you know, which is, you know, why you end up in the mental health system is you know, you got to go somewhere. So, I was really angry about this for the longest time. I had really serious abandonment issues. I was, as I began to sort this out in my mind at the start of 2013, I could kind of see this, everything about isolation is such a big factor. And then I looked at the stigma and all of those things, and I could see how the stigma, isolation, and abandonment becomes such a key contributing factor to both the short-term crises and long-term mental states. I became really, really, really angry. And it wasn't just about me. I mean, it was every case I looked at. I thought, oh my God, these people are being abandoned. This is terrible. And, so if you feel angry about that, I get it. I'm bipolar, I'm male, I am capable of horrifying nuclear grade anger. What I found though was, the only person I hurt was myself. And when I went into group therapy at the start of 2014, these are all the things I heard in group therapy. These are reactions. Actions are your responsibility. They're not the responsibility of people around you. They're not the responsibility of the world. They're not the responsibility of anybody or anything. These reactions are your responsibility. And I was pissed off about that. I didn't want to hear that. But the more I looked into it, the more I studied the science of all this, and the more I worked on it myself, and one day I just hit that aha moment, and I realized, this is actually a lesson I learned many times in life, but needed to learn again, was, if I take responsibility for what's going on, I'm in control. Not the world, not other people. I am. And again, that's the hard thing. But once you accept the hard thing and start working on it, it got remarkably easier. And my sense of self-power grew. And that, folks, is how I got to where I am. I would not be here if I did not take self-responsibility for things that go on in my mind. I would not be here if I kept blaming everybody around me. I would not be here if I kept having so much anger to things that went on around me, what my family did or didn't do, or friends, or the mental health system, or psychiatrists, and all these things. So now here's the problem with self-responsibility. Let me tell you what I did. I just went to the mirror. And like I say, I've learned this lesson before. I got all these problems going on. Nobody wants to talk to me anymore. Everybody's avoiding me. I'm feeling abandoned. You're going to feel sorry for yourself and then more angry and all kinds of things. And this just becomes a horrible, horrible loop. But I kind of have this ability to kind of pick myself up and give myself a talking to, and I do have a logical mind that I can manage to kick into gear, and an enormous amount of background reading and study of life and all these things. And when you want to understand where the problem is, you have to look at the common denominator. And so I look at all my friends, all my family, and I have a huge social circle all around the world. All abandoned me. And, I had to have ask myself, is this, could all these people be wrong? Like, what's the common denominator? Like, they're all just people. They're just in their world doing their thing. Every person has a right to do, not do whatever they think is best for themselves. And, the only common denominator in this whole thing was me. And So I realized, okay, I'm the problem. And I think most people are capable of, but this is where this is why it becomes difficult. When we look at ourselves and we, kind of see, maybe, kind of sort of dawns on us that maybe we're the problem. Um, the problem is blame. This is, this blame game. And this is why just about everything about the blog, everything about the polar bears is getting away from the blame game. We don't have to blame anybody. We don't have to blame others. We don't have to blame ourselves. We have to get away from blame. So when we take responsibility for ourselves, it doesn't mean we're blaming ourselves. It just means this is on me. I have to do something about it. That do something about it is a little bit of a longer thing that we can't get to today. But what I need to really get through to people, everybody, not just me or you or any particular person, but even though I'm talking directly to you right now, is we have to take responsibility for what's going on in our minds. And the simple truth is, and I've touched on this a number of different times in blog posts, in other video talks and things, is, if we don't take responsibility for it, we give it away to other people. And then the world, other people, all these things that are completely out of our control are in control of what's going on in our mind. And that people is why most cases of bad mental health happen. There's a whole line of discussion I have to have on that, the neuroscience of that. But when you give away the keys to your mind and let other people control what's going on in there, you're lost. There's literally no chance to have good mental health. There's literally no chance to have any kind of inner peace. There's literally no chance to not react to and break down to life around you. And I was trying to think of ways to illustrate this, and again, I've had to learn this lesson over and over again. And it was this huge bipolar, this terrible case I went through, that made me, I guess, most learn this lesson. Years ago, I lived in Taipei, Taiwan. I went there, I was really excited and happy, and it was all Zen. It was all just a new learning experience. And it's an entirely different world from where I grew up in and lived in Vancouver, Canada. And I ended up getting in order to go to work and get to school and all the things I needed to do, I ended up getting a motorcycle to roar around in. And that was really exciting at first. And after a while, Taipei is one of the busiest cities in the world, and the traffic rules are not what we're used to in the West, shall we say. So every day there's just millions of motorists and cyclists and pedestrians and cars, and I'm trying to get to work or school, and my Western mind that was used to the street rules of Vancouver just couldn't handle what was going on the streets there. I thought, oh my God, how could that person do this? How could that person do that? And and I just beat myself into a rage, and I'd end up at school and I'd take my anger out on students or something, or I'd internalize it and practically make myself sick. And I'd rage at my friends from Taiwan, like, how can this traffic be so stupid? And one day it just occurred to me, Brad, wake up. This city's been here for decades. This whole thing just grew. It just is what it is. It's not going to change. A city of 5 million people and all this traffic, everything that's there is not going to change just because some foreigner comes in and pissed off and can't handle it. So what I realized is that's not going to change. And this, again, is part of self-responsibility. You cannot go through life and have the world be the way you want it. You cannot go through life and have people go as you want them. The world is just the world. Life is just life. People are just people. There's 7 billion people on this very hectic, crowded planet. The chances of that matching your little mental idea of ideal is less than zero. It's impossible. It's literally impossible. So if you keep expecting the world to change, or life around you, or people around you, again, you are absolutely lost. It is absolutely, simply not possible for that to happen. And back to my own case and my own realizations and my own steps to what I kind of hit me, what I understood I needed to work on. And, talking about all this abandonment and all this anger I had about all these things and, what I thought, put me in this position. I looked around at all that, and and again, I had the same discussion. Brad, you can't expect all these people to change for you. And, I'm the one who has to change, not them. And, the more I thought about that, and I can clearly remember the morning this all hit me, and I started working on all this in my mind. I'm feeling all these abandonment issues, and a lot of abandonment issues comes from not feeling heard. We all want to be heard. It's kind of a common thing. And I kind of, I'm trying to be intelligent. I'm studying all the science and stuff. And then I realized, Brad, you're this this kind of 1 in a million bipolar person. The chances of somebody hearing and understanding what I've got going on in my head are literally zero. I've been in group therapy. I've been, like I say, I've been everywhere. Psychiatrists, psychologists, friends, probably 100 or more people. And, and I didn't feel heard by anybody. I'd get angrier and angrier. I kind of had to, Brad, give myself a slap. You're this 1 in a million bipolar person with like unfathomably weird shit going on in your head. Nobody's going to hear that or understand that. Like, you have to give that up. And so, back to isolation and what we need to do to get better. And when isolation becomes such a big part of what's going on in our heads, and the anger and the frustration and the fear and just so many things, there's whatever people and the world around us. One of the weird things that happens in most cases of mental illness is our minds just get closed, more closed, more closed, more closed in on themselves. I've done an enormous amount of study into the neuroscience of this. The more this happens, the more our perception of reality changes. That's why I talk about reality so much. And so the more our brain becomes inward and turns inward. And the more isolated we get, the more this happens. It's a really terrible cycle. I can look back and see how that happened in myself. And I've seen how that, you know, again, just dozens and dozens and dozens of case studies, the same pattern. Schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, you name it, very, very similar patterns. You know, so again, like my own experience, we can't expect people to come into our world. It's just not possible as much as we want that to happen. So if we want to be heard, if we want to be connected, if we want to get away from the pain of you know, sense of abandonment and isolation, you know, we all need love. We all need understanding. I'm really, really big on that. But you know, this comes back to the hard thing. But the hardest thing is it's really unlikely that people are going to come into our, you know, really damaged inner worlds as much as we would want that. And I cannot tell you how much I understand and identify with that pain. You know, like I said in that interview, like I went through some nuclear grade pain, and if I had heroin to numb that pain, I would have done it. But I just knew that wasn't the long-term answer. So, you know, again, how do I do this? How did I get through all that? I took responsibility. You know, I can't expect, you know, I just realized I can't expect all these people to come inside my weird, diseased, bizarre mind. It's too hard for those people. And since I've started working with others and helping them, I've realized just how fucking hard it is. And the more I work with other people, the more I can look back in hindsight how hard it was for my friends and family. And then I realized they weren't abandoning me. They just couldn't do anything because this was impenetrable. Like there's just no way somebody's going to get into my mind and understand that. So I'm not going to get the kind of understanding I wanted. And, you know, it's a whole nother topic, how I deal with those things on my own. But what I realized, and coming back to what I mean by self-responsibility is, you know, I had to realize I can't expect these people to come into me. I had to try go towards them. And, you know, I can't tell you how abandoned and lonely I've been at various points in this journey. Heartbreakingly, heartbreakingly, heartbreakingly abandoned and lonely by every single solitary person important to me in my world. And, you know, there's a time you know, I'd never spent Christmas alone in my life, and 3 years, yeah, 3 years ago, you know, I was kicked out of everywhere. I had nowhere to go. I spent Christmas by myself in a shitty old van by myself up in the mountains. And you know, I made a good day of it, but you know, I couldn't. You know, I ended up making a good day of it because, you know, that's just the training I'd given myself and learned. But I you know, that the pain of abandonment in the beginning was just brutal. And you know, but I kept coming back to the same lesson, the same lesson. I'm the one who has to change, not them. I have to do something to go towards them, to make myself more appealing to them, not them come to me. You know, they would. I'm not saying everybody like completely ignored me. You know, they would try. I can see in hindsight people trying, but it was, again, it was just way too difficult for them. The average person is just not equipped to deal with it. Even highly trained people are not equipped to deal with it endlessly. And I've had conversations, like I say, I meet a lot of people through this, many of them professionals. I've had some very good long conversations about this, and they confirmed what I'm telling you. Like, even for highly trained professional people, this is really difficult. So, again, I had to go, who has to change? Everything around me? It's not possible. That's not going to happen. But this is what I learned. This is what I found. And this is why my life ended up turning around. If I take on the responsibility and I realize I have to change, not the world around me, and I start making the effort to go towards those people, projecting a different image, speaking differently, it's, attraction. It's how people work. We can't be horrible inside and attract people. That's not how it works. We repel people. This is why a lot of the abandonment happens. We don't mean to do this, but just what's going on in us is just repelling to people. And, in my whole trying to understand stigma, I've kind of come back around full circle to understand that in quite a different way. And understanding, that what we're going through, it's not like people aren't affected by it. They are, but again, there's nobody who can handle it. And most people are busy. They have their lives going on, all kinds of reasons. And again, if we can, this again comes back to this blame game. And if we can, get away from the blame game and just realize, it's not their fault. It's not our fault. There's nobody to blame. It just is what it is. And then just go, okay, take responsibility for what's going on in our mind, or what our reactions and everything that's going on. And this is a whole other topic, how to do that. But just realize, we have to somehow get ourselves in a better place. And this is what a good deal of the polar bears is about. All those little techniques for getting in a better place, the meditation, the mind training games, the music therapy, all those things I talk about and teach and practice every day. This isn't just lip service for me. This is my life. I live it every day. And, and I can go through, a terrible episode, but I just always realize this is on me. This isn't the world. This isn't my friends. This isn't politics or any of those things going on. This is on me. And I get myself in a better place. And then, I kind of move towards the people in my life. And this has been the journey the last several years. And what I found, people, is the more I did that, put forward this better person, this better projection of myself, and it's not faking it. I had to make it real. You can't just put a smile on our face and fake it while we're boiling inside. I had to deal with the boil first. Then the better face, the better projection just comes naturally out of that. And the more I started to project a better image and do all these things, then all these people that I thought abandoned me, they felt it was okay to come back. And and the more that happened, and the more we connected, and the connection's not here, the connection's not there, the connection's in the middle somewhere. We have to meet in the middle. I got to this in my post on mental illness and communication. And it's actually, now that I think about it, ties into that really carefully, or really closely. Nobody's going to come 100% our way. And we're not healthy enough to go 100% that way. So we end up meeting in the middle somewhere. And then I could hear them and hear their pain and anguish at watching what I went through. And the more I heard what my family went through and how hard it was for them or friends and so on, you know, the more I realized, wow, okay, you know, that was not unreasonable to do. It's just hard. It's hard for everybody. There's nothing easy about any of this. So again, this is why we have to get away from the blame game. It's not other people's fault. People are people. They, you know, we react, they react. There's no perfect way through this. But if we can get away from the blame, get away from thinking that others are doing things to us, and instead just realize these things are just happening, and what's going on in our head, the emotional reactions. And again, for me, we're talking way, way, way more than just emotional reactions. We're talking horrific psychosis, terrifying, kind of almost like out of my body experiences going towards suicide, number of times, many times. Like, again, I'm not talking about just being emotional. I'm talking about some real horrific inner breakdowns. And every time I had to realize it was on me to calm down, get sorted out, and take responsibility. And the more I did that, the more power I had, the more control I had. And, you know, again, in that webinar interview, people kept wanting to know how I did this. That's how I did it. I took responsibility. You cannot expect the world to change for you. You cannot expect your friends to change for you. You have to change. Is it hard? Fucking rights, it's hard. It's never not hard, but I'm sorry, that's life. Life is doing the hard thing. But if you take on the responsibility of doing the hard thing, like I said, in that odd way, it gets easier. Because you don't expect other people to do it, which isn't going to happen. You know, if you do it, it can happen. It's the only way it can happen. Okay, so you know, again, this is something I've wanted to talk about for so long, and there's no pretty way I can do this. I have to be a bit of a tough ass about this. And again, I don't ask anybody to do anything I haven't done in spades. I have a whole Walmart of been there, done that t-shirts for this. And, you know, my mind is what it is. You know, bipolar, it's one of the worst psychiatric disorders there is. That never goes away. That's never not my life. And if every day I don't wake up, one day at a time, get through that day, I'm responsible for how I react. I'm not always perfect. I'm still going to have, you know, things I'm not proud of, we'll say. But when I sit down and look at what happened, I just say that's on me. It's not this thing or the other thing or, you know, whatever's going on in the world. Like, the world is never not going to have emotional triggers. The world is never going to conform to your microscopic personal needs. You know, I have to get you to think about this. We are in a world of 7 billion people, remarkably different people. It's one of the reasons I study brain science. And I could tell you there are no two brains on earth alike. And if you expect all that to conform to your needs, good luck. Honestly, we have to take responsibility to going and conforming a little bit to the world. This does not mean giving up your personality, and you know, there's just a lot of nonsense out there about this. You know, the world is not going to conform to one tiny microscopic being in this mass world of ours. And this is kind of a topic of a lot of existential angst. But again, the only way to get past that is just accept the bare bones truth reality of it. It was like back to me battling this one little foreigner, battling the whole traffic system of a city of 4 million people. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And this is what I just keep coming back to it, Brad. Like, world's not going to change to suit you. I have to change to not everything about me, but I have to, like I say, it's kind of, we have to meet in the middle somewhere. Okay, so that's the basic talk today. I'm not getting a lot into the specifics. I understand, but that's the message I have to get through. You have to change, not the people around you, not the world. You do. That's called self-responsibility. And I've after realizing this a couple, when I realized this back, it was after my 5th hospitalization. That was the end of 2013, Christmas 2013. I spent Christmas with family. Went to a hospital the next day. Was in the hospital for New Year's. Got out in the New Year, and I had to, what triggered it, to be honest. Like, this is my 5th hospitalization for intense kind of, there's things, again, the bipolar mind does that just most people don't. And this was one of them. And there's a lot of people trying to help. There's a lot of people trying to care. And I kind of had to take responsibility for what I was doing to them. I had to tell myself, I have to stop doing this to my family. It's scaring the shit out of them. And the reason it's hard for them to be around me, because I'm so fucking scary. And, they're not going to change for that. I had to change what was happening in my brain to make these things happen. So, and then I happened to go into group therapy not long after that. So, where I learned basically the same lesson. And, people want to know how I did this. That's how I did it. I took responsibility. And when you do that, you have the power, not the world, not all these things around you. You do. And when you understand that, your life will change. I don't mean instantly. It's not like click your heels 3 times and you go back to Kansas change. I just mean that's going to be the start of your change. But you have to look at yourself in a year. Do you still want to be like this? Your brain and mind being whipped around like a rag doll. You want to talk about emotional roller coasters and stuff. There's literally not possible for a mind to go through roller coasters more than a bipolar mind. And again, I had one of the worst bipolar minds there was. There are no worse roller coaster rides, literally. And I had to learn, I was the one to stop that. I had to be the one to get myself off those roller coasters. The world wasn't going to do that. Nobody can. Nobody could. That's why the mental health care system failed me. I had to do that. So those are the life lessons. Let me need my eraser. I don't have my eraser. But again, it's self-responsibility. Is that hard? Yeah, it's hard. It's life. Life is hard. When you accept that, it oddly gets easier. So self-responsibility, and chip away daily at doing the hard thing. All this gets easier if you come back to one of the main tenets of the difference-making fundamentals. I wrote a huge post about this, staying in the now, staying in the present day. This is how we do the hard thing. If you look at the big picture hard thing, it'll crush you. You have to break it down into little bits. Sometimes that's 5 minutes. And I tell people I just try to get through that day. Sometimes it's just getting through the next 5 minutes. That's why I don't off myself, people. I just get through the next 5 minutes. Okay, I did that. That's okay. I'm still here. Then I get through the next 5 minutes. And that's the way it works. That's how we do the hard thing. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you for watching. Was this a hard lesson? Yeah, it is, I know. But that's the way it goes. We learn and change by learning and doing the hard lessons day by day, folks. Over and out. Thanks for watching.